good evening. We'll start the podcast Jobs in Canada. The podcast when I invite several players and works with a relevant career experience in North America, not only Canada, to talk a little bit about their career and explain the challenge and all the aspects of the career. And with that, we hope that you can help everyone who is watching that to find new ways or possibilities in this complex market. Okay, before we start, I have some message of our sponsors here. We are here in TFA Studios. For those who are looking for information about tourist visas, permanent residence in Canada, citizenship process, study in Canada, TFA is your go-to solution. TFA has been proud supporter of careers in Canada since the very beginning. Follow them on social media, and don't forget, we have an exclusive 15% discount code for you. The links are in the description. And again, we don't talk about immigration in details, and they are the experts who are going to provide them much more helpful insights than us. And follow the next one is MB Tax Solutions. After year comes to the end and the fiscal year begins, our tip for you to file your taxes safely with MB Tax Solutions. If you need assistance with starting a business in Canada or any another accounting solution, they're here to help. Be sure to follow them on social media on mbtax_solutions and the website mbtaxsolutions.com. And we are incredibly proud to have Brazil Remittance as one of our sponsors. Brazil Remittance is a Brazilian company, has been in operation in Canada for over 32 years, specializing in money transfers from Canada to Brazil. They offer highly competitive rates and warm, personalized service in Portuguese, English, and Spanish. Be sure to follow them on social media, Brazil Remittance online on Instagram or in brazilremittance.com. And that was amazing for us because we have here Peter Hawks for Mellowhawk Logistics. Is one of our sponsors. We're really proud to have them. Yeah, I think it's much better than I talk about Mellowhawk to let Peter talk about it. Right?
Well, I'm delighted to talk about Mellowhawk, but before I talk about Mellowhawk, I'm going to talk about Terry and I'm going to talk about Angela Mosqueda.
Sure.
I will tell you something. I love the fact that those are your sponsors along with MB Tax because I'm actually using Terry services right now that have been instrumental in helping us with some of our colleagues, and that's been wonderful with Ferreira, and with the Angela Mosqueda, as you know, has supported everything ever since I came to Canada or to Toronto. Angela Mosqueda's name was out there, and now her children have taken over the business and do a great job, and we use them all the time too. It's secure, fast. I'm grateful to be part of that community. And now with Mellowhawk. So Mellowhawk Logistics, we've been around for 22 years, and it's been very exciting for us to not only be part of the community, but also grow our business. When Arno started the business, and I didn't want to, and so it's funny. I'm going to tell a little story about that. I was actually working in publishing, and I had a great job and kind of a glamorous job, and then I lost my job. And I was already 40 years old. I was already wondering what the next thing was going to be, and I was overpriced in a dying industry. And then Arno said, I want to start this company, and I need you to help me start it. And I said, well, I can invest with you in it, but I hate the idea of moving boxes. Who wants to do that? And in the end, about 4 months after he went on and he said, look, I need help. And so I joined. I will tell you, it has been a joy. It's given us a wonderful life, a great opportunity to help people. So we do move boxes. We move commercial cargo. We move personal cargo. We move what's valuable to people. Okay. And so it's not just boxes ever. It is people's lives. It is their livelihoods. It's their businesses. And in addition to that, it's given us an opportunity to participate in the community because we do really everything we can to contribute and to help. And even when we weren't making any money, we were trying to do something. And, over time, you build a business and you provide employment, and it's really grown. So I am grateful to be part of this. I know that Mellowhawk Logistics is grateful to be part of this. And, hopefully that in the stories that we tell over this podcast, that you realize the value of our company, but also the value of what we can do beyond our company.
Perfect. Really nice. For us, it's a pleasure to have them
like people from Brazil or who understands Portuguese have the opportunity to see the podcast we did with Arnold. Was also perfect. It was a pleasure to have that. So go there. I'm gonna put the link on the description as well. Unfortunately, it's in Portuguese. Maybe Arnold can come back here so we can do another one in English. Would be awesome. Okay, last but certainly not least, simply the best burger I ever had. I'm not saying just because they are our partner, right? But We Burger is a Brazilian company. And it's getting tremendous space here in Canada market. It's unbelievable. I remember the first time when I talked to Renato, I said, man, are you crazy? You're going to do one burger to Canadians. So it's the same there. Canadians go to Brazil, try to teach samba to them. So, but it's amazing. It's incredibly good. So they are make the difference for sure. So follow them.
So we have it here. For me, it's a pleasure to have her here. We studied the same university. Unfortunately, it wasn't the same year, but not exactly in the same period. By, I don't know, destiny, right? It was almost there. We're going to talk a little bit about that as well. So welcome to Careers in Canada, Deji Johnson.
Hi, Rodrigo. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to have you, especially because your career, right? You talk before you started in Canada, then you moved to US. So we have lots of things to discuss about this difference, right? But we usually start the podcast, talk a little bit. How was the beginning of your career?
Yeah, I spent in the beginning of my career 12 years working for Bell Canada Enterprises. And this is back before it was for ExpressView, which eventually now is 5TV. So we started off on the ground floor when they just purchased or was like a limited partner with this really interesting satellite TV company. I think the first in at least Toronto, Ontario, maybe the first in actually Canada. And so it was a pretty interesting experience starting this kind of, being a part of the ground up of this new, partner backed by Bell Canada, but really scrappy enterprise.
How long did you stay there?
I was there for 12 years.
Oh, it was a long journey, right?
Yeah, that was my very first corporate career.
Was after your graduation, I believe so, right?
No, I worked there through most of university. So for my undergrad, I went to York University and I did, got to make that little money on the side. And so I worked through at least 4 years out of the 6 years I was in university.
Oh, interesting. So which course did you do on your undergrad?
Yeah, I originally wanted to be a lawyer, and I was like, yeah, I'm gonna, maybe be a translator, maybe be a diplomat. Those dreams crashed and burned. And so I ended up doing a language degree and then switching to history. So nothing to do with business at all. My career really started in a very different place.
Interesting, because as you said, there's nothing to do with business, but how did you decide to work in Bell? Because it's completely different, right?
Yeah, actually, so I started in the call center. So I started from the bottom, hopefully made it to the middle. I started in the call center, and so they actually used to do these little job fairs, and the recruiter would come to our campus. And so I was on the Frenchy campus of York, so my major was in French. And so they were just like, yeah, we want bilingual people, come be part of our call center, do customer service. And so that's how I ended up working at Bell while I was still in school.
Interesting. You mentioned that about the customer service. Usually, it can be just my interpretation, but there is a kind of a pattern, right, for people who stay longer at the company. Usually, I saw people I worked for Ambridge. People were there for maybe 25, 35, 30 years. And usually people start at the very beginning, 17, 18 years old, and they grew in the company, right? I can see a pattern for these big companies, right? They like to do this kind of things. I don't know if you share the same understanding of the market.
Yeah, I would definitely say there's a lot of people that I know that are still there. So that's kind of crazy because I left there 2010. So there's people that are still there, and I started in 1998. So yeah, there's definitely a lot of what we used to call Bell lifers.
Yeah, interesting. And then after Bell, so what happened after when you leave the Bell? What was your falling company?
Yeah, so I unfortunately got laid off, the first of several. And so after that, I actually took the time to go back and do my certification in project management. And it was actually through Bell. They had taken me through Lean Six Sigma. So I had my yellow belt from Bell, and I was like, oh my gosh, I love this. Organizing, project management, this is awesome. And so when I got laid off, I was like, I'm going to just go back to school and learn a little bit more about like to be a real project manager. So I took like a year off, went back to school pretty much full time at night. And then I ended up working for a mature startup that did customer experience.
That's interesting because you completely changed for like a company that has several years of in the market. For a startup, the environment completely different, right? So how was to
Very
work in
much.
completely new environment with new challenge?
Yeah. So when you work at Bell, especially by the time ExpressView got swallowed up by Bell, it was definitely a much more corporate environment. So we only had casual Fridays. The rest of the time you had to dress up, very, hierarchical, many levels. And I ended up at this mature startup, and I was like, oh my gosh, what's going on? Like, people were just so free, like the things people used to wear to work. I was like, should we? Maybe not. And just the language, like there was like F-bombs being dropped everywhere, left, right, and center. It was just such a like 180 going from this kind of more buttoned up, corporate environment to this startup. Like anything goes, we'll cuss people out, we'll leave our doors open, and we'll be like, haranguing people. And I'm like, I don't think I should be hearing that there. So it was like very eye-opening and very different.
Oh. How long did you stay there?
I wasn't there for very long. It was definitely not the right environment for me, and not the right role. So there's like this whole thing with project management. So people get program and project management confused. And so they were really doing program management, and I wanted to do project management.
Yeah. Well, it's very different. People, don't understand. I had exactly the same experience. I was working in a company as a project manager. Then I was suddenly working the program level, completely different. It had lots of similar, right? Because the program works in the high level. You have the projects like behind. You have to manage it, but it's a different style, right? So without experience on that, it's complicated, right? Okay, and then how did you go to the US? Because so far your career was here, right?
Yeah, and I would still be here for a little bit longer. So I ended up working for the company the startup was called In Moment. So they did customer experience surveys. I was only there for maybe 13, 14 months. And then I ended up working for Complete Shift, a mom and pops. They've been around, I want to say 150 years. And they were in manufacturing, food manufacturing. So they were a white label company called Morrison Lamoth. And so I ended up being there only for maybe about 15, 16 months. And I unfortunately got laid off again.
Yeah. That's the bad part, I know that's frustrating, right? I understand. For example, I'm from Brazil, right? In Brazil, usually people who are afraid from that, they usually work for the government, because the government, they can't fire. I don't know here, I'm not sure, but in Brazil they can't. It's actually pretty bad for the government, right? Because you have sometimes bad people working there, you cannot fire. But for people who go work there is a kind of security, right? And that's the bad part. And then after that, so what did you do after that?
Yeah, well, I was already kind of thinking, my career trajectory had been pretty cool, had a lot of really cool managers, and they let me learn different things. I moved up when I was at Bell in the 12 years, going from being on the call center floor, going to be management support, listening to agents' calls. Then I finally was doing a project coordinator role. And so I was like, I'm really kind of hungry to learn a little bit more about business, because my undergrad was history and languages. Completely different. I barely spoke English that first couple of years, because my classes were in French, Spanish, and Mandarin. And so I was like, well, I've been kind of like just organically moving around, learning things, because I'm such a curious person, like poking into every folder, asking questions. And I was like, well, I've kind of gotten this far in business. I think I want to go further. And so I decided to do my MBA. 6 months before I got laid off, I had already been putting in the research. I'd applied to HALT. And so when I got laid off, I was like, this is cool. I'm just going to go back to school. This kind of sucks, the timing, but, would have liked a little bit more money, to cushion. But yeah, that's how I ended up doing my MBA, because I was like, I want to really kind of get a little bit more about the theory of business and understand better the things that I'm kind of just flying by the seat of my pants doing.
No, makes lots of sense. But you said about Mandarin. Do you speak Mandarin? Do you understand Mandarin?
Not very well.
It's a very tough language, right? So even people I know I interview here, they live it there for years. They are not able to speak.
Yeah, I don't know if they'd ever say I can speak it, but I actually found Mandarin one of the easiest languages to learn, having done French and Spanish for, a very long time. Mandarin was like kind of easy in the sense of there's no verb conjugation. So, Spanish, Portuguese have like 6 tenses for every verb. Then you've got multiple tenses, past participle, imperfect, like it just goes on and on. Mandarin is kind of like, we'll stick a verb modifier and your whole sentence is in the past.
But I've heard the problem is the sound, right? Depends on the same word, depends on how you do the pitch, right? Is the different meaning, right? That people usually complain.
You know what? Once again, having learned French and Spanish, so French and Spanish both are accent languages, so they have their different 5 or 6 different accents. And what you don't realize is that those accents are telling you how to pronounce the word. When you learn Mandarin as an English speaker, they do the same thing. So they show the accents the different ways. And really your mind is already set to be like, accent aigu is one way. The different accents, you pronounce them a certain way. So it actually translates to Mandarin, because when you're learning it, they put the accents on the word. And so your brain is like, top down, tonal. So wasn't that hard in the moment. Now, I probably suck terribly and horribly.
No, but you mentioned something interesting. Maybe for like an English native speaker, it'd be easy, right? Especially the verb situation, right? As you said, like Portuguese, Spanish, like has lots of different, and English doesn't have it. Like basically, like in comparison of this aspect about the verb conjugation, it's kind of could be closer than English. Interesting. It's an interesting view. Okay, but so you said about the MBA. So how was the experience? You
tried that, tried that,
right?
Then come back and
MBA
put a
that
comment
I did, but you started in San Francisco. Can you tell a little bit about it?
Yeah, one of the best decisions of my life. Holt was an intense, crazy, learned so much, made so many new friends, such a diverse experience that it just really changed the trajectory of my career.
Yeah, that's impacts for I don't know, probably in San Francisco I had the same opportunity than myself, right, to know people from completely different cultures, right, and to kind of grab a little bit from each one and try to apply when you're doing business, right, and to try to learn. I think for myself, I learned a lot how to respect other cultures, how to live in a completely vast, like, diversity environment, right? I think that's the huge thing. Ain't gonna be without how to gonna be, I don't know how gonna have this experience. I don't know if you agree with me.
Yeah, I mean, Toronto is pretty diverse, and I feel like it's just gotten more diverse since I left 10 years ago. I would say what was really cool about the diversity is I feel like when you come to Canada does a pretty good job in not assimilating like the US, but they do a good job of giving you this kind of like base level culture, social. When you go to a workplace, you're going to behave like this. When you're walking the street, you see garbage on the ground, you see garbage, like it just kind of gives you a unified base level of culture. And then on top of that, wherever you're from, I'm from the Caribbean. I was born here, but my parents are from the Caribbean. So I grew up with, Caribbean roots, wherever your culture is. And then with Holt, though, it's like you're getting the unfiltered culture, right? So people who worked, I had a classmate from Italy, classmate from Mexico, wherever you're from and the norms of how you worked, you don't have that filter of, this baseline, this is how we operate, this is how we do meetings, you don't have that. And so you're coming into Holt and you're bringing in your raw, unfiltered culture. That was like a bit of a culture shock.
Interesting. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I agree with you. And then after Holt, how was your first experience after Holt?
Yeah, I got to work for a nonprofit, or quasi-nonprofit as they call themselves. So I worked for the Health Plan of San Mateo. as a project manager. So that was like exactly, fitted in. And I think it was just a really cool experience because I'd never been in an organization that was so about the people it served. And I think when you work in corporate and it's all about money, 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 going into an organization where it's like everything that they did was like, how does this serve our members? How does this serve our providers? How are we, making money, but also making sure we're saving money and not spending ridiculous amounts and reinvesting back into the organization? So that was like a really cool experience and mind shift to be able to enjoy the pros and the cons of really being focused on the people you're serving.
Yeah, and gave you a completely different experience, right? You start on Bell and then you completely change and you change it again. I don't know. It's good. But that's why I like to talk with my like Latin Americans in general. I'm gonna put a little bit expand, but we are kind of used with these kind of things. But here in Canada, I feel people are more okay. Like you said, it's a Bell life, right? I stay there for the whole life, doing exactly the same thing. How the market accept you with? I understand this is good, right? To have like a lot of like it's different skills that you learn for different environments. How do you feel like the market understand this changing like career and work in different like industries?
Yeah, for me, the market has loved it because even though there are different industries, I was still kind of in the same realm. So really around project management or operations, how to, data. So just a lot of the things that I was doing were pretty consistent, not exactly the same, but the shell of it. But then by being able to go into different types of organizations, it really gives you a broad view of best practices from different ways. Like if you're in corporate, how you might handle things in a nonprofit is very different, versus when you're a startup, what are the things that a startup can learn from a corporation, right? What can a corporation learn from a startup? Like being able to move faster, being able to make decisions, being able to be more agile. But yet a startup can learn about being more structured, how important to scale up processes. How do you, do things in a way that allows you to grow versus having to do a lot of manual work. So I think it's actually been really good for me to have all of these different experiences. And then for me, my end goal when I went to HALT was to become a consultant. So everything that I did, every course that I took was all about how do I eventually get to a consulting path.
Okay. And did you get your goal?
I did. My second job.
Oh,
Out of HALT.
Here in Toronto or was already out?
No, at HALT, after HALT. So I worked at the health plan of San Mateo as a project manager. And then my next job, I got into consulting.
Oh, very nice. Here in Toronto, the second one?
No, I haven't been working while I've been in Toronto. Yeah. Since I did my MBA, all of my experience has now been American.
Okay. Yeah, tell us a little bit, how was this different, right? Because so far you're like working in Canada, right? And then after HALT, HALT, I believe so, your connections, you did everything. You started a new path on the US. Can you tell us a little bit, how was this change? Did you feel lots of difference?
Yeah, I mean, I would say foundationally, it's probably mostly the same. I would say relationship-wise, it's a little bit different. I don't know, but growing up in Canada, especially when I grew up, not age myself, but how many years ago, I often was the only Black kid in classrooms, maybe one of two. I remember one of my schools, there were 60 Black kids in a school of 1,600. So I was very used to being a minority, being the visible minority. I think that has definitely changed in Canada in the last, since I was in high school, and definitely in the last 10 years. But what I think is very different in the US is there is so much more racial disparity in how you treat people. And so as a woman of color, there are stereotypes that I feel don't exist quite as strongly in Canada that exist very strongly. Like one of my experiences was working with a manager and he was like, JD, you're so aggressive. And I was like, I ain't never been called aggressive at work in my life. So I don't know how you came to that. And part of that is when you are assertive or when you are, excited or passionate, which is definitely my personality, other people are like, oh, she's just excited. This is great. But in that situation, he was like, you're assertive. You're not assertive, you're aggressive. And I was like, that goes to the stereotype of angry black woman, which is very pervasive in social media in the US. So we see it in Canada, but I'd never had that experience of anybody ever saying your passion now makes you aggressive. It was a head turner for me.
Yeah, it's pretty bad. And I think here in Canada, from my experience, right, I've been here for over like 11 years. People are more adverse, like avoid conflict, right? They try to there is something they don't like, but instead of say in Brazil they're very competitive all the time. If you do something, is completely different here, and something that you have to learn. If you have to do tell a message that is bad, you have to try to do the more polite way possible, right? To offend. I don't think the US have this at all, right?
I wouldn't say not at all, but definite a difference. I've totally received, feedback like, oh, X, Y could be improved, or people saw this and it's like, oh, okay, cool. I never had feedback where it was like, girl, you need to step back. And I'm like, oh okay.
This is kind of unacceptable right here in Canada. People never, I don't know, I cannot tell for everyone, right? But it's unlikely to happen, this situation here. I from my experience, right?
Yeah, I mean, in the 15 years that I worked in Canada before I moved to the US, I had never had that kind of situation arise. And so I was really taken aback by it. But, one of my closest friends in grad school, he's American, he's black. And, he would talk about the experiences that he's had moving through as a African American in the US. And I was like, oh, I've just kind of experienced all of the stories that you've told me about. Like, I finally had my first, taste of it.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I'm not a person of color, but I faced in my own health a situation that was horrible. We were in the class on Saturday morning. There was people from different nationalities. The leader was from Ghana, and he's a black person, right? And then there was a lady. She was late because she was from China, and he was in the role of the leader, right? When she arrived, remember the rules, right, for the group, this kind of things. And she was late, and he said, no, we cannot stay because according to the agreement, we have a contract there, right? You are late, so you cannot be part of this meeting. Everyone signed the thing. She said to him, who do you think you are? Do you think you are Kofi Annan? The time he was in right? UN. I was so offended, even though it was not with me. Because what? Actually, she said that you are not a powerful black man. You are an ordinary black man. I was so pissed. I left the thing. For me, it's done. I don't want to work with this girl. And the guy, I don't know how he behaved. My intention was to go to him, right, to her, to say, come on. Inside the university, cannot allow this kind of situation. But I don't know, he didn't feel, of course he didn't like 100%, but he didn't want to do anything because come on, I just don't finish MBA, it's kind of things, But it was the first time that I see something really strong like this in front of me. And I said, man, if you don't do for you, do for black people in general, because this kind of situations she gonna do outside here with other people. It's ridiculous. Anyway, it's kind of situation that really when I remember stay angry. Anyway, so let's move on. Are you still in the consulting? Or you in the same company? Did you move after this experience?
No. So sadly, as I mentioned, I've been laid off way more times than I want to count. So I actually got laid off last July. I'd been with that company for about 7 years or almost 7 years. And I was working with another consulting firm, but it wasn't a good fit, so it didn't work out. So I kind of, after losing my job, not of my desire 4 times, I'm kind of like, I don't really want to work for the man anymore, at least not right now. I just couldn't even picture having to go through the job hunt with all the layoffs going on. It's like just such a terrible market. So I've been working on a side project for the last 2-3 years. I'm not trying to make money with it, but just kind of setting it up, making things, putting my ducks in a row. And so I decided, you know what, I'm going to actually take this time. This is what I saved money for, is if I ever lost my job, is that I could not have to stress about things as much. So I was like, I'm going to take this time and work on my own job for the for the next, I don't know, we'll see how long we can run out with before we run out of money. But I'm going to just work on my own thing instead of trying to work for somebody else.
Yeah, I understand that. Some people are also decided doing that because they said it's better to, like, instead of grow others' business, try to grow my own business, right? I understand. But can you tell a little bit about your company? So what exactly you do? So what your plan goals?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not trying to make money yet. I'm just trying to set things up. But basically, one of the problems I want to solve is throughout my career, I've worked for, 25 years. And so what I realized is that when people are new managers or first-time managers, or they're emerging leaders, they are so not prepared for the people side of leading teams. And I've in my career had probably somewhere between 30 to 50 different managers. So I've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly. And so I actually want to make a change and help people think about, how do we prepare our leaders to be leaders, not just manage the work, but how do we prepare them to lead teams? So my goal is to create a business that's a tech-empowered consultancy and coaching organization that uses a emotional intelligent framework that really focuses on inward, outward. So looking at self-perception, self-awareness, self-regulation, self-management, intuition. How do we build this muscle of managing yourself first, so therefore you can manage others? And so the goal is to have like a very practical and tactical tech solution that will help build that kind of psychological muscles around emotional intelligence, around performance reviews, and help first-time leaders be prepared to lead people, not just manage work.
That's amazing. I believe you're going to have lots of opportunities because people need that, right? It's so great. Yeah, interesting. So you have been working this for 1.5 years. So you create a business plan. Have you hired someone yet? Or still organizing everything to see? Because the idea is amazing, right? To operationalize maybe is a challenge, right? But first, definitely, I believe you have lots of market opportunities.
Yeah, so there's a model framework towards it. So like, how do I create this program? And I also have an app that I'm thinking about how we're going to build this app so that this app will help you go in, do exercises, do activities, build up this emotional intelligence muscle, and then with a coaching piece to kind of help you reflect on what have you learned and how do you know these things. So right now I'm building out the program, like what does this activity look like? What will this app look like? And then I'm also working on, what does the program, pricing, all of those kind of fun things look like before I kind of introduce it to the market.
Interesting. Very nice. Yeah, it's an interesting aspect. I'm curious. Maybe you're going to come back here in the future to talk how was the experience, right? I also have some contacts after the podcast to give to you about startups and people that I believe you can talk, you can connect. Because one of the goals of this podcast that I enjoy the most is connecting people, right? Based on said to me, I think you have to contact them. Maybe business opportunities can rise from here. So this is the goal. Great. And how people find you if they want to talk, to discuss, maybe, I don't know, some investor are talking to you and decide, I don't know, that's a great idea. So I was looking for something. So how people find you and how they going to connect with you.
Yes. I have a LinkedIn and I have a website. I'm going to call it a microsite. So it's a little bit more of a portfolio so that people can learn a little bit more about me and what type of services I'm looking to offer. Do I know it off the top of my head? No, but I will share it with you. And you can flash it on the podcast.
I got to put the link here for people to reach you. Don't worry. Yeah.
But yeah, I have a LinkedIn and I have a Instagram and I have a microsite.
Great. Yeah, I think from my side is that I'd like to thank you for part of Jobs in Canada. It was great. And people, we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.